Hello, friends. David here. I just recorded this amazing interview with one of the great Sarod players of our time, Allauddin Khan, and it's a really beautiful conversation. I think this is one of my favorite episodes, and you'll enjoy it whether you're deep into this music of Indian classical raga, or if you're totally new to it. You'll find it fascinating. We get into I don't want to ruin anything, but there's some spiritual entities enter. There's stories of a runaway child that completely changed the history of music. I learned a lot, and but there is some inside baseball, I must admit. So it's always been my intention to keep the tent as big as possible. So I just thought I'd give you a short explanation of who some of the players involved are in this conversation. So here it goes. As you know, most people into music probably know that there's two kind of iconic players who are responsible for bringing raga, the classical music of South Asia, to the West. And that's Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan. What less people might know is that they both had the same guru. They both learned from Ali Akbar Khan's father, whose name was Baba Allauddin Khan. And for some time, Ravi was actually married to Allauddin Khan's daughter, Annapurna Devi. And she herself was another legend of music. While she chose not to perform publicly for most of her life, her students, like Hari Prasad Charazia, who was the number one player of the Bansuri flute, the bamboo flute, and Nikhil Banerjee, great sitar player, they were some of the most influential musicians on their instruments. So you can keep that straight or not, but two more musicians we discuss extensively are Alla Raka. And Alla Raka was the tabla player who conquered the West with Ravi Shankar, the sitar player, with Ali Akbar Khan, the Sarod player. And his son, Zakir Hussain, the son of Ali Akbar Khan, he extended the legacy of his father on tabla and became the most iconic tabla player of all time. And he reached just tremendous new audiences working with the Grateful Dead drummers, Mickey Hart, and making these incredible Planet Drum collaborations, amongst others. And recent work with Bela Fleck, the master banjo player, and all those musicians that that Zakir collaborated with will all be playing actually Carnegie Hall, March 6, 2026, and they'll be celebrating his life and what would be his 75th birthday. So, anyway, our conversation is with that really fantastic Sarod player, Allauddin Khan, and he is the grandson of Baba Allauddin Khan, who's that same guru of Ravi Shankar, Ali Akbar Khan, and Annapurna Devi. And he is the son of Ali Akbar Khan, who is just one of the most sublime musicians who ever walked the earth and brought the Sarod to the world. And that makes Alam as his oldest son, and Alam is now the custodian of that school of music founded by his grandfather, Allauddin Khan, the Maihar Gharana. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. It doesn't matter if this is all new information and you can't remember. It all makes sense in context, but thought it might be helpful for some people. And we'll jump into it. This was a really fantastic and fun conversation with an amazing musician, Allauddin Khan, recorded just a couple days ago. And here we go. Enjoy. Oh, And I'll mention that there's a one little break. One of us had to run out and get something in the middle of the conversation. So there's a break in the middle of this interview, and you'll see. We get back to the story eventually. All right, enjoy, and thanks for listening. You're listening to NYC Radio Live. David Ellenbogen here. I'm really stoked, actually, to be chatting with Allauddin Khan. We've kind of orbited each other for a long time, but never really got to chat.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Thanks, David. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So congrats on the new album with Vijay Iyer and our good Nitin Mitta, good friend Nitin. That's not necessarily like the recipe, a piano Sarod. You know, it's not guaranteed to be like a winner, but somehow you guys found a way. And it's like, especially your tone is just gorgeous. I don't know who the engineer is on that album, but it really sparked.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like that first track on it was literally it was the first thing we played. We just hit record and started playing. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't any planning. Let's just say that. Yeah. And this guy over here in Richmond, Neil Godbole, he's the guy that did the recording at the studio that I work at a lot, Airship Laboratory. So it was nice. It was just we said, let's get together. You're here. We've been talking about making music for over a decade since we met. And we flew Nitin out because we both had worked with Nitin separately. So it was nice. He was kind of the one that also helped to just flow because he knew us both. And
he's the first choice guy for so many reasons, right? He's just so chill, and he kind of doesn't force anything musically or otherwise. It's.
He made it. It was just easy and flowed exactly with him. So, and we had some. It's tricky because Sarod and piano obviously are just different tuning systems and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But you just kind of you figure out how to make it work as best you can when you have those moments. I can slide through notes on my fretless Sarod, so and that way I can kind of adjust things as they go. And the musicianship is obviously 100% there with these guys. So it I don't know, it was nice. And that was only just a snippet of all the stuff we recorded. We just wanted to release a few tracks. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Now you're Vijay, he found a way, like, he has a gravity. He found a way to like kind of create these pads and stuff like that kind of worked in the rags.
He didn't really, he wanted to be supportive, and I think he was saying it's almost like playing with like a vocalist, because sort of Indian music for the most part, single melodic phrasing and stuff like that. So, it's not his first rodeo.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you've got the Zakir celebration. It's coming up March 6th in the big hall of Carnegie Hall. Is that your first time playing Carnegie Hall?
I've played in Carnegie Hall with Pandit Chapan Chaudhary and Ramesh Ji, actually Pandit Ramesh Mishra, when I was like a teenager. But it wasn't, I don't know if it was the main hall. I think there was a different hall.
Yeah, maybe
in Carnegie. Yeah. So, I'm looking forward.
Yeah, well, not too many people could say that anyway. That you play
I'm happy to be able to honor Zakir Ji. I was able to participate here in the Bay Area for the big Grace Cathedral performance that was put on, as well as at SF Jazz. So, this is the in Indian music, the T-High, at Carnegie Hall. So,
right. Yeah.
this is the sum. So I'm happy to do that, and I'll also be joining along with Mickey Hart and I believe Bela Fleck and a bunch of others for the finale, which I wasn't originally doing that, but we just started working on that stuff. So it'll be special.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. And you toured. I remember you were touring with Zakir. I remember some shows in Hawaii or something like that. I don't know if it was an extended tour.
Yeah, that was the last stuff that was 2019. Yeah, just before COVID. Yeah, that was the last, and I wish I had known that, but it was nice to be able to have a couple shows like in a row with him and his family, who I've known my whole life, and yeah, I wish we had gotten a recording of that, just like voice memo recordings on iPhones.
Right.
Doesn't really cut it, but yeah.
So when you got to play with, I mean, was that, I guess, when did you first connect with him as a, just as a human being, or, when did, I guess he was always around, right? Because of the Ali Akbar School of Music. And
when he came and visited me when I was a newborn baby. So I've known him. He's known me forever.
Right.
Since the beginning. And our families have his two daughters, Anissa and Bella, I grew up with, and Tony G, and my whole life. And when I think the first time I had the opportunity to play with him was probably when I was accompanying my father, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan, on Sarod, and that was we did a bunch of those shows, and I was supporting my father on Sarod, but of course I got to play with Zakir G, and then a number of solo concerts and things like that throughout the years. But there's never enough time. You always want to have more time. I have so many questions I wanted to ask and places I wanted to go musically, but the beautiful thing is the treasure trove of recordings that my father left behind with Zakir G, and all the concerts, released and unreleased, that you can continue to just learn from, fall in love with. They're incredible. So there's no end to the inspiration and things to be gotten.
Yeah, and I don't know if it works this way, but like, did you ever get a chance to ask him any particular musical questions, or did you have any kind of conversations explicitly about playing or music in general?
Yeah, it was more like, the main takeaway that I got from conversations with Zakir G was don't be afraid to try new things. If I could sum it up in one kind of message or sentence, it was, don't be afraid to try new things. And for me, as a purist on the classical front, not in the contemporary world, but it took me a very long time to dive into contemporary stuff and kind of find those lanes, because I always made other styles of music, and then I made classical, and I kept them very different. But for the past, I don't know, 15 years, I started to do all of my contemporary stuff. But as a purist of classical music and raga and tradition and the Mahar Gharana, which I'm now the Khalifa of after the passing of my eldest brother, Ustad Ashish Khan, last year, I have a lot of, at least whatever the world thinks about all those titles and traditional things, I know what it means. And I was born into that under my father and grandfather, Baba Allauddin Khan. So in that sense, that all means a lot to me, to uphold that. But there's also, and so that's why I sometimes don't want to do kind of radical things in a raga context or in a traditional context, because I'm trying to maintain that purity. And the reason I'm trying to maintain that purity is because the things that my father was able to do, the power that he harnessed in his music, and my grandfather, it was by following this and so I don't want to deviate too much. But then I have to look at it from different lenses and see how my father himself, even though he said he was maintaining it completely, you can see that he did stuff. And if you're versed in his music and Maharaga and all that, you can see things and areas where he was really pushing the limit and really a radical in his own right, you know. So in that sense, it just gives me more, that helps me lean into and embrace more that mentality of don't be afraid to try new things. And if you're like holding back and going, I don't know if I should, maybe just do it and see what happens. And that's kind of that's the overarching thing that I got from conversations with Zakir G. So, and I'm still figuring out how I implement that, you know?
Yeah. No, I mean, I really, I feel for you with having to try to navigate both, you know, being the steward of such an important, you know, tradition, and then at the same time being like a Zakir type person who he figured his own way. I mean, and as did your father, you know, in that they like really expanded the audience in a huge way, you know, like for like, you know, when you're talking about an album that your father did that pushed some limits, you could say like that Legacy album he did, which has some string sections, and it's not a classical singer, right? It's
Asha Bosley, the famous playback singer of India.
Yeah. But that one was like really the album that really touched my heart. Like I was like, oh my God, this music, you know, and that opened the portal for me. And you know, I guess a guy like Zakir G's like legacy is kind of that, right? It's like you have a big tent, and then you're also preserving something sacred.
Yeah. I mean, Zakir's father, Abaji, Ustad Alaraka Khan Sahab, you know, he created a whole system of playing, you know, like that Zakir G was born from that innovative, you know, total like revolutionary kind of mind state of playing. So for him, you know, it's different sometimes when you look at tabla and rhythmic repertoire versus raga. They're not exactly the same in what you can do, but there are overlaps and many things that you can and pushing the envelope, but they are not one and the same. So you have to look at it in your field. How does it make sense to you? How can you do it? What can be pushed? What can be changed? What repertoire can be created? My father's repertoire on the Sarod, he created almost like a whole additional vocabulary of phrasing that was introduced to Sarod, which all Sarod players use to this day. And many didn't before that. But yeah, no, my father also, you know, he worked in the film industry in India when he was younger also, and did a lot of mixing of things for old Bollywood music, which is more classical, obviously. But he was always pushing the limits in many different ways and things. And Journey was iconic for me growing up, and for so many people. I have conversations with people all the time that are like, "Oh my God, Journey! That album was incredible." I was just talking to, who was I talking to there? Blake Mills, and he was like, "Journey." He's like, that album was so, you know, I mean, it's reached so many people from so many different styles of music and levels of fame and musicianship, different people. But anyway, then Garden of Dreams and then Legacy. But, you know, the thing about Legacy is that those compositions are all from Tansen. Those are all like oldest compositions. Those are all blood relation compositions. You're not supposed to teach even those compositions. My father had a lot of struggling over that, where he was doubting that he should do it. throughout the whole process. But then ultimately he decided to, and he had known Asha Ji since, for so long, because he had worked with her sister Lata Ji Lata Mangeshkar for so many recordings and the film music industry and stuff like that. So he knew, I want to have Asha Ji come because I can teach this material to her in a fast way. She'll absorb it so much, because that's their whole expertise, is getting this music and then just singing it and recording it. So that album was a trip. So it's very traditional, but then he added the element of the cello and supporting strings and harmonies and things like that to it, but in a subtle way, and then not so subtle in certain times. But that was a really crazy experience. And we recorded that at Lucas Skywalker Ranch when I was 13 years old. We rented the place out for like a week. It was the main sound stage where they have all the symphonies and probably do all the, I don't know, John Williams type stuff and all that. And that was the first album I ever played on. I played Tanpura. I was playing the drone instrument. And I was a teenager, so I was just sitting around like, oh, this is taking so long to do all these things as a kid. But man, I wish I could have been a part of that session as a performing, touring, more matured musician, and said my feedback about things and added stuff to it. And I would have had so many opinions about things. But back then I just remember being this kid, like waiting till the next take while they figured out all these things. And, I'd ride my bike to the other areas of Skywalker Ranch where they would like be serving food. They have all these bicycles that you can ride from compound to compound, because it's a gigantic place with its own fire department and all kinds of crazy stuff. So that album was a feat. That was a big one for my family, my father, my mother, who arranged all that. So anyway,
what amazing memory. So I know we might get interrupted at any point, but we'll let it happen. But so I've been like, from different scraps and pieces, putting together some history, and I just like you to please correct me about what I get right and get wrong. But
yeah.
So your grandfather, like Allauddin Khan, at around 10 years old, he was in a musical family, and legend is that he ran away because they wouldn't let him play music, or something. Is that
my grandfather?
Yeah.
So he was 8 years old, and his father was a sitar player, but not on a professional level. He was more of a landowner and things like that. And instead of going to school, my grandfather would go to the temple where they would be doing devotional chanting and different things like that. And he would just skip school and he would go and learn, listen to the music. And so from 8 years old, he knew that he wanted to devote his life to music and the pursuit of it. And the which, is really the surrender to it, the salvation of it, like seeking it as a spiritual practice, not just because you liked the way the tune sounded. He had that fire in him that continued throughout his entire life as an 8-year-old, which is quite insane to actually comprehend someone having that clear of a vision where they could leave rural Bangladesh at 8 years old to go to the big city of Calcutta with no one, with nothing, and live on the street, just trying to find nature, and which he did, and all that stuff. So,
and then out on the street, he was like connecting and hearing some of the folk musics of the local people. I don't know, bowels and that kind of stuff. That's what I've heard, that he kind of retained a love for some of the, kind of basically the folk music that those people will be hearing. Is that on point as well? Or?
I'm sure. How you can't separate all the different forms of music from that area. So I'm sure he was exposed and interacted and probably learned all of it, because he was the kind of person that would just pick up an instrument and just like a sponge absorb everything about it and just learn how to play it. And then that was something that he could play, and the repertoire he would absorb. He basically found his first teacher. He was like, going, I think there was like the sadhus, or like people that living on the, like out in the streets and different things like that. I don't even really understand that part exactly, but he would go, and like they found places where they would be serving food, simple chana dal kind of places where he could get dal and rice, and he would eat. And then, don't drink from the Ganges River, don't drink from the dirty river water. You need to go. And he was told where to drink the clean water. He was a little boy, a little child. So like he figured things out. Somehow he was able to stay here or there, found a teacher, learned everything he could possibly learn from that teacher. They said, I've taught you everything, go to someone else. He would go to someone else, absorb everything, go to somebody else. And that was just kind of the theme with him. And he learned Western classical violin along with numerous Indian instruments. And he was in the theater company in Calcutta. And the director was said, this is not the right place for someone like you. This is a seedy kind of business and things, and you're destined for different things. And so he sent him on his way, and finally found his first Sarod teacher, and traveled with him for years, absorbing things, and until he finally made it to his true guru, which is Wazir Khan Sahib, who was a blood descendant of Khan Sen from the maternal side.
Okay, right here we needed to take a short break, but don't worry, we don't lose the thread. We'll get back to it. Here we are as the conversation continues.
Yeah, I probably should have slipped in. So the Skywalker Ranch was that's George Lucas's place. I probably should have helped the audience with that. Right, that's his compound.
Right. Yes, it is. It is just. This is Star Wars country where I live. So I went to preschool with his daughter.
Wow.
Yeah, and like he's got in my hometown where we're moving back to for temporarily. If you go into downtown, there's like an old kind of diner, kind of coffee shop place where he wrote Star Wars stuff, I think, and he like saved it from going out of business. And then they built like a little mini park called Imagination Park. And in the middle, there's a fountain, and it's a huge bust of Indiana Jones. And on the other side, it's Yoda. So in this little like shishi, town, frou town that it has become, is very ridiculously overly expensive, like an East Hamptons thing or something like that. You go in there, and there's Yoda in Indiana. That's cool. He has a house. He has a house close to here, and if you go, you can't see it so much. It's in the hills, but if you drive up there, there's a road that goes in between his house and a second property, which he has built a bridge over the top because he made an Ewok forest on the other side. It's so cool. If you like Star Wars, this is the place.
Wow. Yeah, and they filmed what's his name? That incredible, like the post-Jungian Joseph Campbell. Did you ever see? Joseph Campbell filmed the whole thing at Skywalker Ranch. It's like his interviews. No. Oh my God, it's awesome. I don't know if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell at all, but
the hero's journey stuff and all that. Yeah.
So he did a whole series. I'm sure it's on YouTube or wherever. But Bill Maher, Bill Maher, not Bill Maher, and he's getting interviewed on Skywalker Ranch because. Joseph Campbell was such a big influence on George Lucas. George Lucas was basically a student of his and kind of used the universal myth to create.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's funny. Yeah, that all makes sense. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's super hip.
We always thought of my father as Yoda. We would always joke with him, and he'd be like, who? And we're like, Yoda. He's like, who's Yoda? We're like, yeah, like you, Dad, because you got the same haircut. You're smaller, shorter guy with your cane, and you're like, oh, dull you are. It's like, and we would just say shit like that, and we'd be like, Raga is not with you today, or Raga is dead. Like you killed it. You're 99.9% wrong, not 100. Keep trying. Things like that, and then he would bust out and flip around the room with his lightsaber, and my dad would be playing his music, and so we use the Yoda comparison a lot with my dad.
Wow.
I don't think he liked it very much. He's like, who is this? And we showed him a picture. He's like, oh, what the hell? But to us, we're like, no, you're like you're the grand guru of the Jedi order.
It is kind of like a Jedi thing. I mean, the first time I went to an overnight concert, I knew nothing of the culture or anything. And I went and I saw all these people dressed in robes, touching each other's feet. And then Slop and Chattery gave a tabla solo. And I was like, what is even going on? And I wanted all in. I wanted to be like, a Jedi apprentice. It didn't work out for the better, I think. But there is that thing.
There is for sure. There's also Sith too.
I'm sure.
We won't name who they are. No,
you're all over.
There's both sides of the Force, my friend.
Yes. That's right. All right. Well, if people got very frustrated as if they caught tail into this, where we were at was
my grandfather, right?
Yeah, grandfather.
And finally meeting your final guru was Wazir Khan Sahib, who is the court musician in Rampur, and the story of my grandfather is truly that of like legend, it's almost mythological at this point, and things of my father's too. But there's certain people that come to this earth, and I don't know, you have to wait for them to come, because if you're on the planet at the same time as them, what a blessing. Or if you can learn from that, it's what a blessing, because they're just divinely created here on this planet, it seems like. So
okay, and then when does he just kind of, I mean, his genius is kind of recognized at a young age, but when does he kind of like his feet are established and he's the guy, he's the Maihar Garan? I mean, I guess is it that he got the patronage, from the court, or like when does it turn from him being a student to like technically a master?
My grandfather we're talking about, right? Yeah. Well, he had learned under Wazir Khan Sahib. He learned so many things, secrets of music, like that are taught only to bloodline. He was basically made a son musically of Wazir Khan Sahib, and treated as a brother to his other children that learned the music as well. And there's so many stories. He used to tie his hair to the ceiling so that if he would nod off during practice, it would wake him up. That was one of the stories. I mean, stories of deities manifesting. I mean, I grew up with all of these stories as being like church. I was like, no, this didn't kind of happen. This did happen. My grandfather, he ended up settling in Maihar, at a small town in Madhya Pradesh, and he became the court musician for the Maharaja of that town, and was given land, and he built a whole beautiful home. That's the home where he taught my father, Ali Akbar Khan, my aunt Srimati Annapurna Devi, and of course Pandit Ravi Shankarji, and others. And that all happened in that home, which people have seen photos and videos of all that. And that's where my father was, born, I believe, in Bangladesh, and then they moved over to Madhya Pradesh. So he really grew up in that place, and that's where all of his musical training took place. So my grandfather was known as another he knew so many instruments, right? They say that he could play over 200 instruments. I can't even name 200 instruments, so I won't try. But his main instruments were violin and Sarod. Those were the main instruments that he really excelled at, and was known as a brilliant genius of those instruments. And then when my father, there's so much that I'm obviously skipping over, and details and things. But when my father was born finally, and he began learning at the age of 3, my grandfather had him play a lot of different instruments. And then eventually my grandfather was like, Sarod is the instrument that you're gonna play. And I think perhaps some of the tremendous dynamic range that my father has, to me, he's unparalleled in his dynamic range on that instrument, and was a lot of different sounds and tones and things that he created were probably from emulating all these different instruments as well, because he learned on numerous instruments. My grandfather would sing, he'd play violin, he'd play Sursingar, he'd play all kinds of different things, and my father would he would be like, create this on the Sarod and things like that. So that it all played into the brilliance of my father and his imagination coming into play, forming, and the vocabulary being made of the Sarod to what we all play today.
Yeah, and I don't know if I remember it. Well, first of all, I shouldn't have let it just slip. I mean, the legend or true or not, but entities appearing during intense practice.
Yeah. My grandfather, it was, there's stories of, he would play sometimes through the night, and a woman would appear in a red sari. And my grandmother saw this woman at night and was like wondering, of course, who's this woman in my home? In the courtyard. We have a home with a big courtyard in my heart, so it's an open space, and she would see this red sari and all this stuff. And so one night she went after and tried to see what was happening and confront. And the woman, when she went towards them, evaporated through the wall. And my grandfather came out and he was laughing. She said, "What is going on?" He said, This is Ma Sharda." It was like a manifest, like an aspect of Saraswati, the goddess of music, Saraswati. She visits me when I play. And so that was just like, oh yeah, that just, that's just a thing that happens. And my father said also that, he was forced to play 18 hours a day for 20 years. That was his life. He had no friends. He went to school with the princess of the town, like the children of the Maharaja, and then it was straight back home. He had maybe one friend across the street who was the son of the mayor of the town. And besides that, he had nobody but his little sister, my aunt, Annapurna Devi, and then Raviji when he came as a teenager. And my father would, it was very militaristic, his upbringing, and what he had to endure from, physical abuse, mental abuse, all that stuff, as having to, learn like that. And it was, people pleaded with my grandfather. I heard about later about trying to be easier on him because it's so much. My grandfather, remember this 8-year-old boy that ran away from home, he wanted to pass all of this on to my father. And so it was, in order to do that, it was militaristic. But, what ultimately he gave my father created one of the greatest musicians the world's ever known. And it was at the expense of my father's wellness as a child and stuff like that. But he was somehow able to compartmentalize that and live a long life, and one without any crazy abuses of things himself that might cause people to burn out, and deal with such trauma. My father was pretty good at that. He had the music. And my point is that the love that he got from my grandfather, he told me later on, was through the music. And he felt how much he did actually love him, even though he didn't show it in person usually. My father's eyes were always down. His head was always down. It was just, yes, sir, whatever. He said, I didn't even get to see my father's eyes until I looked at pictures of him later on. I never could look at him because that's the kind of thing, He had to go to school. He had to go to bed fully dressed in kurta, probably kurta pajama, with his instrument tuned next to his bed. So if my grandfather called his name in the middle of the night because he felt like teaching, my father would have to be there by the third time he called his name. Otherwise, he'd get, probably hit or something like that. But my father, he ran away from home a few times. He was successful one time. That's another crazy, funny story. But anyway, going back to what I was saying about the deities and stuff, in the town there's a famous mountain where the goddess Masharda, which is the deity of our town, basically, and kind of like a Saraswati goddess, and I believe related some aspect of her in the Hindu philosophy and whatnot. My family is both; they practice both Muslim and Islamic and Hindu things, because we were Hindus. We were Brahmin Hindus, and we had to convert. That's a whole other story, a Robin Hood story of battling and all this kinds of stuff. But my father was coming back home. It was dusk or twilight. He knew he had to be home for lessons. And an old woman said to him, it's getting dark and I need to get home. And the mountain is on the other side of the town, where the temple is up many steps to the top. And there's all these stalls where people sell things and all the things for the temple and whatnot. And my father knew he was going to get in trouble, but he said, yes, I can take you. And he walked this woman to the other side of town, maybe a 20-minute walk, something like that. And when he got there, the woman thanked him. And they said goodbye. And when my father turned around, he was back in front of his house. Yeah. So it's stories like that. And it's not like, come on, Dad, are you kidding? He's like, huh? He's like, this is what happened. I just told you. So, when I say it's like church, it's like that's the story. And so there's a number of things like that growing up that I've been told about. And so it makes you just go, well, there's something else at play here. There's something in this music. So, that was always kind of these helped, I don't know, but these formed my mind state around, don't mess around with this music, because there's something here. And if you do it the right way, reach its full potential in whatever ways it can be, you bow to this music and have the reverence for it and the devotion for it, perhaps some of this will appear, and if it's not in extreme ways like that, it's ones sonically and things that can affect you internally or for your health, for other people, create a cathartic, transformative experience, all these kinds of things. This is the philosophy, this is the ethos I was brought up in, in the history of things.
Yeah, it is true that somehow, music being a conduit for energy, or maybe actual energy, and when you send it out, people say take care of the music and the music takes care of you. The first year that I produced that Ragas Live Festival, 2012, it was a radio thing, and my apartment burned down like a week or two later.
Man.
But I had you wouldn't believe how many people offered me to stay at their place right after, because I just done this thing, I just got 24 hours or helped facilitate, get that thing out. And it was such good vibrations that it was some of the best times of my life. Actually, I was staying with all kinds of people. I was traveling. It was amazing. But anyway, I want to jump back to the story, because it's so that. Did your aunt, did she get direct talim from your grandfather as well? Is that the same? Was it the same
she
time?
Did. She did. My grandfather had another daughter. She was the eldest. She died early in life, shortly after marriage, arranged marriage. But she learned the music. And when she went to the in-laws and the other family, it was a source of contention in that day and age. And I think that affected my grandfather, and he didn't really want to do that. And for a long time, they couldn't have a child. They couldn't conceive. And there was a holy man very close to my family, Rampur Baba. His samadhi is there in Maihar. And, you know, I believe what it is that my grandfather was given this kind of flower and given to my grandmother and said, eat this flower, basically, this ash and this flower, maybe not ash, but this flower, I'm forgetting exactly. But from that, my father was born. So, you know, he was the flower child.
Wow.
Pun intended with the 60s and all that in San Francisco. But no, he came from that. And so my grandfather had to put all of this weight on my dad. Fast forward to when my father was learning, they weren't allowed to record. They couldn't record anything. There was no technology to record anything on. They weren't even allowed to keep notes. And sometimes my father, when you're learning 18 hours a day, you're going to not really remember everything. And then you're beaten, and then the fear of being beaten makes you remember a lot of stuff. And that's kind of one of the things that happen, or you're anyway. So my aunt was sitting in the next room, and my grandfather left to go to the market or go gardening or do some kind of thing that he did. And my father was there, and she came in and was telling my father how it went because she was listening and she remembered the line. So when my grandfather came back, he heard her singing this line. And from that day forward, he said, I will now teach you. But it was more of like teaching you for, well, I don't actually know this for certain, but teaching you for this as a spiritual kind of practice, as a kind of, thing in that way. But then she did go on to play many concerts, and there's a whole story with that, playing with Ravi Ji and all that stuff, and all the dramas that caused between them and her marriage with him, because she was married to Ravi Shankar, and they had a child who passed away. Shubho is my cousin. And that's why me and Anushka are actually kind of like cousins removed, and Ravi Shankar is my uncle removed, I guess you would say. So our families really go back, but that's a whole other thing I won't get into with my aunt. There's a new documentary actually about that entire thing and about her whole life. That's pretty, it's quite a thing. People should watch that if it's not yet available. I think it's still doing film circuits, but I think it's called Akash Ganga. It's her address is the name of the film, and it's the first time you can hear her voice actually telling about what life was like for her and how she became a recluse and all these things, and forego, like, stop performing and all that stuff, and made a pact to never do that again. That's why there's only 2 recordings of her in existence. But she was a giant. What she knew, she was, it's her, it's my father, Panditji. I mean, it's like they have all of the jewels of the music of my grandfather. So a lot of history, a lot of things.
Yeah. And her, I don't know if you know this, she has like an authorized autobiography. I found it on Amazon or something, and I read it and learned a lot about her. And it's like, I mean, so many people kind of hold her up as like the symbol of just art for art's sake, like the pure, clearly if you're not performing, you're not going after accolades or money or whatever, but she was able to like channel that wisdom and give us like Hari Prasad Charazia and Nikhil Banerjee and all those people.
Yeah, I mean, she which I learned from her a little bit as well. And
wow.
She was the only one my father gave me permission to learn. He said, if I'm not alive or you're in India, you can learn from my sister. And she said to me in times like, I don't have to do anything different than what my father taught me. So what I play is just what he did, because I don't play for the audiences. You have to play for the audiences. So do a little more of this or do a little bit of this. That's okay. She would say things like that to me sometimes. And she's like, your father, Panditji, Ravi Shankar, their imaginations were something else. Like she almost thought of what they did as, yes, very much what she did, but also different in a way. She would say that I just play my grandfather's music, or my father's music.
Right.
So, but then, she would teach me something, and then I would go home and I would show my father, and I said, Pishima said not to do this line. And my father would say, huh? And I'd play it, and he said, well, that's because she didn't learn it in the way that I did. so they even in the Maihar Gharana, in our style, like you learn from one person, you learn from another person. Yes, a lot of it is very similar, but you're always going to find things that are also very much unique to the individual or their experience, that when they learned on their own. It's different. My grandfather somehow was able to craft such different sounding musicians that you could distinguish their playing and their sound. I mean, to be able to do that with not one but numerous titans, colossal figures. It speaks to his brilliance. It's all these people came from my grandfather, the 8-year-old boy that ran away from home. It's crazy.
So how much is it true that like kind of the modern presentation of raga, when we go to a concert, how much of that was developed by your father, Ali Akbar Khan, and Ravi Shankar, and perhaps your aunt, Annapurna Devi? Like, how much do we owe them, or is that like an accurate statement that they kind of figured out this is how we're going to do, this is how it's going to reach the world? Because from what I understand, it wasn't always like Alap George Allah, kind of thing in a public presentation until then. But I don't know if that's accurate.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'm careful to how to answer these things, because I'm not a historian or a scholar in that sense, where people will say this, people will say that. There are plenty of families of music, instrumental and vocal and different things, that have been doing this for so long. I think with my father, it was, well, going back to my grandfather also, it was kind of like the formatting of what can be done on the different instruments put into a cohesive rendering, so basically, like, you're coming in the old days, you might go to one person to hear one raga. They might just play one raga, one or two ragas, that's it, and they only played a certain section. Like, you'd go to hear them for Jor, and then you would go to it, they'd have to switch instruments, or you'd have to go to somebody else on a different instrument to hear something else, and then you'd have to go to somebody to hear something else. So my grandfather modified the Sarod, added more sympathetic strings, and changed a few things to be able to, what he felt, play more of these kinds of things, this Drupad style, and I mean, I feel like our style is a mixture of Drupad, Khyal. It's a mixture of different things, but he learned on all those different types of instruments, so we learned the way that the music went in those sections, that type of treatment of the ragas, and that was adapted by all of them on their instruments. My father and Raviji also popularized the Jugalbandi between Sarod and Sitar. Before that wasn't really a thing. And what it was my father wanted, organizers would come, ask my father for the concert. Nobody knew who Panditji was at that time. And my father said, let me bring Ravi Shankar with me on stage. And then my father brought Ravi Shankar on stage, and that's how the whole thing happened and how it became so popularized, and the rest is history, so there's that thing as well that they did. But every family had their own way of playing and things, and formatting of sections. So I can't say that what they do is what everybody else does. No, because those sections and all those things have been done. But it's the way that they format, the way that they play the the types of compositions, you know, I mean, that was something that they really had a hand in, at least with the world also being exposed to the music, because Rabiji and my father, they were the ones that really came and made the first big impact of the music. My father doing the first LP of Indian classical music in 1955 in New York. You know, he was that was him, and then you know, of course, Rabiji, you know, meeting the Beatles and becoming the teacher of George Harrison and all that stuff, and it just exploded into pop culture. That literally that moment was so fertile for everything to happen, and it just happened in such a way, and that's why, you know, everybody knows Sitar and Rabiji and all that, because that was the stamp on pop culture. It all happened through him. Everybody had their own kind of roles to play. Mm-hmm. And certain people were meant for those roles. That all kind of worked out in the way that it needed to, of course, with some things that could have happened probably differently. It might have been nice as well in certain aspects or what, but like, this is the way that it manifested. So
yeah. And from my understanding, Yehuda Menuhin was a big champion of Ravi Shankar and wanted to present him in New York. I don't remember if it was Carnegie or Town Hall. Mm-hmm. And Ravi couldn't do it. And that was your father's, who wasn't even like interested necessarily in you know, worldly acclaim or something. That's kind of like what brought him here.
Yeah, my father wasn't interested. I mean, he was probably the biggest. I mean, he definitely was the biggest Sarodist of India, and I would say instrumentalist, or one of them. I mean, next to Vilayat Khan Sahib and, you know, them side by side, and Panditji and all this stuff. I mean, they were the biggest ones. He had no reason to. They had to push him on the plane, basically. You know, my father reluctantly went to New York, and the rest is history. It all happened. I mean, Yehudi Menuhin was a huge admirer of my father, and they were close friends, and, you know, that relationship lasted, you know, till Yehudi Menuhin passed. And I mean, he would go, I'm sure you've read, he would go on to say things such as that Ali Akbar Khan is the greatest musician in the world. You know, he would say things like, that's the respect that he had for my father. And then other musicians such as Julian Bream and other also would say the same, echo the same sentiment. This might just be the finest musician in existence. And he was the musician's musician, you know? But lots of stuff. When he first came to New York City, the children would run up to him and say, "Where are you from?" And he'd say, "India." They said, "Oh, but aren't there like lions and tigers and things there? Like, how do you live?" And he would, you know, he loved kids. He is a father to many, and he would tell them and talk about India. And he played it on of his TV show and all the different, what was it, the Guggenheim or Modern Museum of the big venues with all the aristocratic families and all the things. And it all happened. I would have loved to, I can only see through pictures and stories, but I would have loved to have been there and experienced the 50s and the first, you know, LP and all those things. But yeah, everybody had their own role. And, you know, my father was not one that really cared for limelight or commercial things, pop culture stuff. He was more of like, I am a messenger of my father, and my job is to play this music because my father wanted me to, and because this music is the only thing I know. And honestly, it's the thing that it was the way that he expressed himself, because he wasn't really allowed to talk very much when he was a child. Mm-hmm. He never had much of a childhood, so that was it. Music was his means of connecting with everything, you know, humans, the divine. It was his purpose from his father given to him. He was his father's. He would always say, when people compliment him, "It's not me, it's my father. It's all him. I'm a messenger of my father. That's it." And he was like that his whole life. So yeah, he was a very, very special, sweet person, and a down-to-earth person too, which, yeah, he was really really quite a man.
Yeah, and one thing that I really hear in your music is you've got that tone. I mean, and I'm really curious if there's something he ever, if he ever spoke to you explicitly about tone or sound or anything that he kind of imparted to you.
Yeah. Thank you. He, when I would sit in front of him, he would always say, listen and watch what I'm doing, like very much everything I did was to try to be as exactly capture everything that he did as close as possible. And he would always talk about feeling. The word he used most in the music is being in tune and with feeling. And, he couldn't emphasize that enough, that like music is there, or you're doing all these things. And, we'd have all these, musicians come to the school that are, probably the elder musicians of today's generation or whatever. And everybody's playing super fast and virtuosic. And he'd ask me, what do you think about this? And I say, that's incredible. Like I'm just trying to figure out how to play the instrument. And he says, yeah, you can play like that if you practice. His thing was, he was never really, he's like, but where's the raga? Where'd the raga go? And then he's like, and no feeling. So it was always that kind of thing where you were trying to get what he was talking about with that expression and that feeling. And so the tone, I mean, what is tone? Yeah. And what is feeling? You can try and measure it, and I'm sure you can get pretty darn close, and you could actually graph out everything that's happening dynamic wise and stroke wise and all the things. But does that still equate to the feeling? Is it a belief? Is it a faith? Is it something that just happens when you let go and you just listen from your heart? Is it something that happens when you play from your heart? Who can really say? But I think it takes someone to be sensitive, and it takes someone to be open. And he used to say, he didn't really weep in his life. I only saw him shed tears when his mother had passed, and one of his children, one of my oldest brother, and one of my older brothers, Danish Khan, and he passed. But he said, I weep when I play music inside. He'd say, that's all the tears are when I'm playing. And you can even see in his face when you watch him really close, there's something going on that's much more internally. And my grandfather would say things like true music, or let's say the most. I don't want to say that this is only one, because people express and receive music in different ways. Some people move their bodies, some people listen, some people it's different. But what he would say, something along the lines of real music is when the audience forgets to clap and the tears just come out of their eyes, that kind of thing. So it was about something much more deeper than entertainment. That was always the thing. And when you think of it, music like that, and you're bowing yourself to your devotion to the music, to the power in the ragas, to the power of the sonics, you're touching the cosmos. And that's what Baba, my father, would always say, things like that. So you could feel the human experience, you could feel what life is like when you listen to his playing in just a few notes or phrases. And to me, people like to talk about style and everyone's technique, and you're a copy of this, or you're a copy of that, or you're almost this, you're almost that. Honestly, for me, the sound that my father was able to achieve on the Sarod was the highest sound that is possible. And I kind of compare that to unconditional love, is what I say a lot. His sound on Sarod was the sound of unconditional love. And why would I try to make a different sound than that? I can purposely try to change my stroke or do this kind of thing to create a different tone or sound, but I said the sound is there. I'm just and my father is gone now. I'm just taking that tone and continuing the story. I'm continuing the message and bringing it into different fields of contemporary styles of music. It's like this character that's been there, the instrument, the sound for all these years, but it still has a life to keep going. And yeah, that's how I think about it. So
yeah, it's incredible, man. It's incredible, and thank you for keeping it going, for doing your own thing and finding a way. And
I'm trying.
Yeah, no, you're doing it. You're doing
hard. It's hard. It's so hard to be an artist in today's world and make music. But when people ask me like about Indian music, I say a lot of the time, like, what do you feel the most when you're playing, especially classical music? It's like, I feel like it's the way that I communicate with my father. It's the way I honor my grandfather and communicate with him, even though I didn't know him. But it's mainly like I'm communicating with my father, and it's like continuing the conversation that we had. I can see myself when I play this line. He taught me this at home, sitting in front of him. I start with this line, then I go to this line, and now what are my choices? And the audience gets to tune in and listen to this conversation that I'm having with my father. And to me, that's the most special thing about the music, is that my family means so much to me. My father is my hero. He meant so much to me, everything. And this is my way of always having him in my life. He's even right after he passed, I had to start teaching his classes 2 weeks after he died. And my whole life, I thought, when my father dies, that's it for me. I'm just going to jump in the grave afterward, because I can't even. It's my biggest fear in life, was losing him and my mother. But my father was an older man when I was born, so that was always on the horizon more than a regular kid that's got a 30-year-old dad or whatever it is, or even 20s or whatever. My dad was 60 when I was born. But somehow I found a way to keep going. The energy came and it propelled me. And I've never been kind of away from him. Maybe physically we can say, but not really, because the music was constant. And I was always, every day I have to think about him and play and do all these things with our music school and the music. And even though he's gone, he's very much not in that sense. And so when I play, I'm continuing that conversation for audiences. They can hear it. So
yeah, it's really admirable too. I mean, that somehow naturally things come through generations, the good and the bad. And the fact that your father managed to have that kind of extreme upbringing, and then somehow with you shield you from the worst elements of that, you weren't sleeping in bed with your instrument.
No,
that's
didn't want that.
To absorb the negative elements and not pass them along. Very few people can do that. Usually we're just repeat.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They either burn out or they just pass that trauma down. And he somehow, he said, I don't want this relationship with any of my children. And he did not force me to play. He did not was never strict or any of those things until I started learning. And then the strictness came and the comments came. He had ways of saying things that really hit to the core of you, and you go, oh my gosh, like you just gutted me. So he definitely knew how to get it to you, what he wanted you to get, and but never like nothing like his father in that sense of things. He was a father to many people. He had so many students and disciples that like they all call him Baba, and it's like he took care of so many people. And didn't pass that on. But that's a testament to how strong he was. And I asked him, like, Well, because he passed away in his 80s, and he should have lived longer, but he had kidney issues due to high blood pressure and different medications that the doctors gave him, and other nonsense. And I said, how well, if the music is so good for us, and you always say that it gives us health, then how come you're sick? And he said, do you think I would have made it this long without having the music? That kind of thing he would say. So, yeah, I don't know. I believe there's tremendous power in this music, and you have to really have, he would always say, a pure heart for it to really fully be able to come through you and all that. And it also helps purify you in the process and make you want to be a better person to yourself, to others, to the world, to your nation, to your world, to everything. And this music gives you a pure heart, and you can't cause the problems and have the anger and create those things if you really practice and unleash that power and potential that's in the music. And I always tell people that the ragas, the way that they're created, and if you learn them from a true guru, a real teacher, real guru, then inside the raga is the blessings. The way those notes are created and the phrases and the things, that is a blessing. Whether you don't see it or not, it's doing something. It's working on you. So we just keep on going. We keep doing the good work, whether there's, if people hear it, those that are meant to hear it will hear it, and others will share it with them. And it gets there. It gets to the people that need to hear it when they're ready for it. So.
For sure. Well, thanks for your time. I really appreciate you sharing all this stuff, and looking forward to hearing you at Carnegie Hall. That's March 6th. Celebrating the great Zakir Hussain, who also went through these same things and figured out how to spread joy and choose the good and get that across. So
and my father has known Zakir since he was 8 years old. I think the first record, maybe even younger, the first time Zakir Ji accompanied my father, he was 8. And my mother was a devotee, a disciple of Abbaji, Allauddin Khan Sahib. She learned tabla for 25 years with him, and she lived with him, and Guru Shishya relationship where she was fully being trained to learn all this. And then and also, Zakir Ji and her were roommates at one time. The history goes back a long while between our families. Our families have always been very much connected. So, and still are. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. Very happy to be able to play for him. So to honor him.
Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. Looking forward to hearing all your next creations. And
thank you, David.
Thank you.